Thank you. Thank you very much, Pranyamanis. Yeah, it was a delight leading the retreat with you. Actually, I always think there should be a new word in the English language that's the special delight when you've seen someone come on something like a winter retreat as a new person and then you find yourself leading a retreat with them. It is a particular sort of joy, actually. Yeah, good. So, yeah, very nice to see you all from up here as well. So, just before I came on this retreat, somebody sent me a photograph of one of their favourite pictures from the National Gallery in London, a Titian, and it's a picture of the newly risen Christ, and he's been met by Mary Magdalene, if you know the Christian story, and it's called Noli me tangere, which means do not touch me, because what's happening is she, Mary Magdalene, who's devoted to Jesus and must be overjoyed that he's risen from the dead, is reaching out to touch him, but he's pulling away like this so she doesn't get to touch him. And the reason is that he's saying that he's of another world now, he's of the spirit world, and she can't touch that. She mustn't touch that. So he's sort of almost like warning her off yeah, pulling away from her. And you see that in the picture. She's reaching out, but there's no contact being made. And I was looking at this reproduction of the picture, and it's very beautiful, of course, painted by Titian. But what I thought was, that's not the Buddhist view. That's not the Buddhist view, that these two worlds, the sort of human world and the sort of other spirit world, for want of a better word, are sort of separated and can never touch each other. And so that was quite interesting to me to reflect on that. And I was reflecting on that, thinking of these figures we've got on the shrine, the figure of the Buddha, the figure of Padmasambhava, and thinking, well, who are they and what dimension are they in? Are they in the dimension of myth, or are they in the dimension of history? And, well, the answer is both. The answer is both. They're in both those dimensions at the same time, which, in a way, has already been touched on by the other speakers. But what I want to add to that, and this is like really, really important, is that is true of all of us. Yeah, that is true of all of us. So, that, it's one of those things, like, if you only remember one thing, actually, what I say, just remember that, because it's very, very important. I'll try and sort of say a bit more what I mean. Yeah, if you're to ask, well, where do these figures exist, where do we exist, are we in time and space, in the realm of history, or are we outside in the realm of infinity? It's kind of the wrong question, because it's like what we're not seeing is that the very notion of time and space is a construct that we're making with our own mind. It's an assumption that we're making with our own mind to even ask that question. And actually we know this. What I want to say to you is we know this. We've had experience of it. And I'm going to sort of try and show you that, to show that we have all had experience of this. So I'll tell you about some experiences that a few of my friends have shared with me, but they're relatable. So one friend was talking about, a good number of years ago now, she went to visit one of our teacher, Bhante Sangharakshita's teachers, Dardo Rinpoche, very, very revered teacher, and she met him and had an interaction with him, And somebody must have taken some photographs. Must have been it would have been before the days of phones anyway, some Polaroid photographs or something of the encounter. But she came home, this was out in India, and then when she came home, they showed her the photographs. And she was really surprised because what she saw in the photographs was herself talking to a sort of wizened old man. But when she had been with Dharda Rinpoche, that hadn't been her experience. Her experience had been with a sort of just a glowing presence. So it didn't add up. It didn't add up, the photograph of this sort of wizened old man. And well, immediately you've got the question, which is the real truth? Which is the real truth? Another experience closer to home is, I don't know if you've been out to the Burial Mound out in the garden here. Yeah, it's it's quite modest actually, Bante's Burial Mound, that was how he wanted it. He wanted it to blend in with the landscape. It's just a little mound in a memorial garden, very beautiful but very modest, and very meaningful to many of us. But on the occasion of the actual funeral, there was hundreds of people here for the funeral, and we were all like round that mound, and Bante's body in his coffin was being lowered in by some of his disciples, Yashodeva actually being one of them, and it felt enormous. It felt enormous. The next day, one of my friends said to me, she said, "Oh, it was like Bodh Gaya." I don't know if you've been to Bodh Gaya, but Bodh Gaya in India is huge. It's like bigger than the whole grounds of this whole place. It's a big central thing. People sort of circumambulate and prostrate, and thousands of pilgrims go there. And again, when she came back the next day, she thought, "Oh, it didn't add up. Like, this place seemed so small." And in her mind, it was like Bodh Gaya. So again, you've got that experience of what's the real truth? And actually, neither's the real truth. They're both true in a different way. Yeah, they're both true in a different way. And then I thought, if we want to sort of bring it down even closer to our own experience, when you fall in love, that person just assumes that aura, don't they, of more than a person. You're very, very aware. You can just walk into a room, even if there's 1,000 people, and you would know instantly whether they're there or not there. In your mind, they're sort of bigger and more glowing than the actual flesh and blood person. So that's interesting, isn't it? Again, what's the real truth? I mean, it's funny with falling, because then you fall out of love and they go into almost the opposite happens. But or maybe not even fall in love. Maybe when you really admire someone, maybe when you even hear someone give a Dharma talk or so, and you might even say, "Oh, you were really on fire when you gave that talk." You see them in a different way. So we experience people in different ways. We experience them in their sort of historical flesh and blood sense, and we simultaneously can experience them in as something more than that. So that's true of all of us, yeah. That's true of all of us. We've got we've got this dual dimension to us, and it's important to know that. Otherwise, we're just condemned to a sort of to a very small material world, yeah. We're just condemned to a small material world. So Buddhism doesn't make this hard and fast distinction. And it's also important, it's very important to me as a Buddhist, and this was one of the reasons why I realized I was a Buddhist and not a Christian, which I had been a Christian and then rejected that. Because if you make that hard and fast distinction, then you create something that you never can become. Like when I was a Christian, I knew I never could be God. God was always going to be something apart from me, no matter how good I was, and even if I got to heaven or something, I could never be God. Whereas in like what Buddhism is saying, by very virtue of the fact, you know the line we say in the puja every single night now, the Buddha was born as we are born. What the Buddha overcame, we too can overcome. What the Buddha became, we too can become. Like that's the truth that speaks to me. You know, that we can become a Buddha. We can, by the fact that the Buddha was a human being who realized something that was sort of, he realized that to be human was more than anyone previously had ever imagined, but it like opened the way up for every person to become that. So, yeah, so the figures on the shrine are both in the dimension of myth and history, and so are we, and that makes anything possible. That's the important bit. That makes anything possible. So I want to say just a little bit more about the Buddha. We've talked quite a bit in our two previous talks about Padmasambhava, and I think we've said that Padmasambhava is thought of and revered as the second Buddha. But I thought I might say just a little bit more of, well, who's the first Buddha? Who's the first Buddha? So the Buddha it was someone in history as well who was born a human being and went on a whole quest and realized this state, if you like, that we call enlightenment. And what that consists of, in a sort of nutshell, as it were, probably different ways of putting it, but is realizing that unenlightened, we've made a fundamental mistake. Yeah, we've made a fundamental mistake, and that is that the mistake is that we think that there's a real solid, unchanging me in here. It's sort of inhabiting a real solid world out there, and that there's a division between those two. Yeah. And as soon as we do that, and we do this at a completely pre-conscious level, but as soon as we do that, then clinging is inevitable, because as soon as we have a real solid me and a sort of a real solid world out there, we have to defend the real me in here. Yeah, we have to keep out anything that we think threatens it, and draw to us, everything that we think is going to sort of augment it. Yeah, so clinging becomes inevitable, and by clinging I mean aversion as well. They're the same sides of the coin. So we make this fundamental mistake. We do that at a pre-conscious level, but then clinging for that rediversion as well, it becomes inevitable, and then all our trouble starts, and then that then causes us suffering, because we try and hold on to things that cannot be held on to. Yeah, they cannot be held on to because they're impermanent, they're insubstantial, and so on. So yeah, and it's important to this point that we're doing this at a pre-conscious level, not even an unconscious level, pre-conscious, because it's not really a moral thing. It's not that Buddhism wouldn't say we're bad for doing that. It's not a moral matter or a moral judgment. It's an existential matter that we do that. We're sort of not culpable for it, but it causes all our suffering. Yeah, it causes all our suffering. That's what the Buddha realized, and he realized that because he managed to undo it. That's what makes a Buddha a Buddha, they've managed to undo this thing that nobody knew could be undone. That's why I often think it's a bit like splitting the atom. That's the sort of nearest analogy I've got to in my thinking. You know, beforehand, before the last century, everybody thought like the sort of nucleus of an atom, the proton and the neutron, was just a thing that was just joined together. Nobody knew that it could be actually split apart. And when it was split apart, like huge amounts of energy were released. So I think it's a bit like that with the Buddha and being human. So up until then, it was just like second nature that to be a human being involved this view of the real me and the real world that resulted in clinging. But the Buddha realized, oh, you can like break that view apart. And in doing that, similarly, all this energy is released. Although in the case of Buddhahood, it's only positive. Obviously, in the case of splitting the atom, the energy can be for positive or negative use. But in the case of Buddhahood, the energy released is just the energy of love. That's all that's left. That's all that can be left, because if I'm not defending myself, all that's left is love, all that's left is love. Anything that's not love is caused by me defending myself, do you see? So if I'm not doing that anymore, all that's left is love. So the Buddha, the word Buddha means awake, and so the Buddha is the first person to wake up to this possibility that hitherto has been beyond imagining. So something completely new has come into the world at the Buddha's enlightenment. You can look at it the other way around, that if you want to look at it the other way around, you could say that all the time there's been this potential, all the time there's been this sort of transcendent reality, this reality that went beyond anyone's imagining, that before the Buddha, or unenlightened actually, we're defended against. We spend our whole time defending ourselves against it. And it's, speaking metaphorically, waiting for the chance to sort of earth itself, as it were, like lightning. But it took the Buddha for that to happen. Once that has happened, then there's more favourable conditions for it to happen again. So because the Buddha's opened up the way, sort of established the goal, said, look, this is possible, this is amazing, this is possible, and given us a path to show us how to get there. So that's who the Buddha is, this first being, this first human being to waken up to that possibility. And then, as Pranyamanas was saying the other night, who Padmasambhava represents, what Padmasambhava represents is he's the archetypal guru. So he has the function of making it possible for us now. Making it possible for us now. So when we're talking about Padmasambhava, what we're really talking about is a force, And that force, you could say, is the eruption into the mundane, into our ordinary world, of something transcendental, something that's beyond that, something that's beyond this world of me in the middle of everything, trying to haul everything into myself and keep everything out that threatens it. So Padmasambhava is a force that's the eruption into that of something beyond that. And drawing from Christianity again, I was comparing it in my mind to pictures of the Annunciation. It's so painted, isn't it? The scene of the Annunciation of the angel Gabriel, like coming with this, Annunciation to the Virgin Mary. And there's different depictions of it. My favourite one is it's by Tintoretto. I'm making it sound like I know much more about Italian art than I actually do, by the way. But I do really like this picture. And in this picture, the angel Gabriel's actually breaking the wall down. So there's like she's in her dwelling, and the angel's coming and like actually smashing through the wall, and he's got all these like cherubim and seraphim, and they're like flames, so they're coming flying in, and she's like, oh my God, she's like, you can see her like drawing back, like, which is quite appropriate really, I think. I often, just as an aside, I got quite a few little reproduction postcards of that painting, and I often send that to someone when they get invited for ordination, because I think that's it. It's like something's about to break in, that you're never going to be the same, yeah? So, and again, you've got, there's us, so there's Mary in this picture, like, with a wall around her, and that's what we're like. Like reality's trying to break in all the time, and we're like this walking, talking defense mechanism against that, yeah? We somehow think that we can own life, yeah? We somehow think there's this thing called life, and it's somehow ours. And if something breaks into it, we think something's gone wrong. But actually, that's how all the time reality is trying to break in. And what we've just got this idea. We don't know what life is at all. We've just got this idea of it, and it's proved to be an idea every time it gets, as we think, interrupted. We think it gets, because we've got this view of what it should be like, we think when something comes along, like illness, for example, even a little illness, I'm fortunate enough never to have had any serious illness, but even when I get a tiny little illness, I'm mildly outraged, I'm mildly like, no, like, no, I was just about to lead the urban retreat, that's not, come on, like, that's not, so there's that sort of sense of how could this happen, and as I say, I've been very fortunate that there's only been very minor in my case, illness anyway. I think we've seen, we're obviously still in this whole pandemic situation, which has had a huge effect on all of us, some possibly more than others. Some people have lost their lives through this, and maybe some people we know have lost their lives through this. At the very least, it's meant we've had to change our plans. It's, again, we've bemoaned that we can't plan. We don't know what lies ahead. But actually, the real truth is, all our plans are provisional. That's the real truth. All our plans are provisional. We think we're planning this stuff that's like definitely going to happen. And if it doesn't, that's something going wrong, and that's, at best annoying, at worst sort of devastating. But actually that's the truth. It's never, we cannot possibly be sure of what's going to happen in even the next moment. But we think we are. So our plans are always provisional. All that's happened in this pandemic situation is that's been highlighted a bit more to us. If we could see that, then the very pandemic could have the function of Padmasambhava for us. That's what I think the real Buddhist message ought to be during this pandemic, that actually, as Subhuti, one of our teachers, has said, the virus is our guru, and that's what he means by that. It's showing us what actually is always true. It's highlighting that for us So it could, if we could only realize that, that would be a means to seeing what the Buddha saw. Yeah, that would be a means to seeing what the Buddha saw if we could see that properly. So Padmasambhava is this eruption into the mundane of something beyond the mundane, of something transcendental. And I'm going to tell a bit of the story of Padmasambhava's whole, like, very sort of colourful career. And I'm going to tell part of this story tonight, remembering that a story or a myth is a way of talking about something beyond the reach of reason, yeah? Beyond the reach of reason. So Padmasambhava is credited with taking Buddhism to Tibet, and I'm going to tell you how that happened. But first of all, it's interesting to even think about Tibet. Obviously, Tibet is an actual place. I've never been to it. So Tibet is does exist in history, but also it's a sort of, in my mind, it's a sort of metaphor, Tibet. In my mind, Tibet is somewhere very remote and quite inaccessible and quite wild. And I don't think it has much vegetation. It's a land of snow and ice. So it's hard for things to grow there. So we could think of Tibet as the actual place, but we could also think of, well, what's our inner Tibet in a way. The king of Tibet is called King Trisong Detsun. This is back in the 8th century, by the way, when this is meant to have happened. And he has an aspiration for the Dharma to flourish. He really wants to build a really, really special, glorious temple. And he's a whole vision for that, what the temple's going to be like. And he, in order to build this temple, he sends to India for this great Buddhist, and this great Buddhist is called Shantarakshita. And he is a great Buddhist scholar. So he sends his emissaries to India with all this gold offerings and everything to Shantarakshita to get him to come to Tibet and build this temple for him. So Shantarakshita comes and they start building the temple, and the king himself lays the foundation stone. I think that's quite important. The king himself lays the foundation stone. There's a sweet bit in the story where he says he's got this kind of golden garden hoe that he digs with and lays the foundation stone. And then Shantarakshita starts building or trying to build this temple, because what happens is during the day they're building the temple, and every single night these demons, these unruly spirits, come and tear the whole thing down. So they can't even get started. It just never gets even going, because it just gets completely taken right down to the ground every single night. And Shantarakshita knows that he himself can't deal with this. Yeah, so that's quite interesting. He knows that even though he's a good man, he's a Buddhist scholar, he's revered as a Buddhist teacher and a Buddhist practitioner, he knows that he hasn't got what it takes to deal with these demons. So that's quite interesting as well, that he knows that. He's not under any illusion about that. And he knows that the only person who can deal with it is, guess who? Padmasambhava. Yeah. So So Padmasambhava, who's also in India, is sent for, and Padmasambhava is quite a different character to Shantarakshita, and operates in quite a different way than the scholar. Yeah, you could say if you wanted to say how it was, you would say it was a more magical way. He has quite different forces at his disposal. So Padmasambhava comes, and he brings all the demons, all the unruly spirits into order, and he pins them down, and he makes them vow to serve the Buddha Dharma. In other words, he gets them to help him, and then they build the temple. Yeah. So there we are. So that's the story, and we're going to hear how he works with the demons later. This talk is sort of part 1 and part 2 of this talk. So I'm part 1, and later on, Pranyamanis is going to be part 2. So we're going to hear a bit more detail about how he tames these demons later on. But what I want to say is a couple of things. One, I want to say this story is not a new story. Yeah, the story of trying to bring into existence something new that hasn't existed before and being beset by demons is not a new story. Yeah, it's an archetypal story. It's an archetypal story. It's the Buddha himself. A very, very similar thing happened to the Buddha on the eve of his enlightenment. He was beset by the unruly demons, all the forces that were trying to hold him back from what he was trying to do. And in fact, everyone who has really committed to bring into being something new will be beset by demons, I think. That is part of it, yeah, and I'll try and say why, and then you can see if you think, see if that rings true in your own experience. But I'll just say something else first. I would just say what Padmasambhava doesn't do with the demons. So, because the story's not new, but the way Padmasambhava responds is new. So, Padmasambhava doesn't kill or repress the demons, yeah? In fact, you can't kill them. You can't kill them, or you'd be sort of killing part of yourself, as it were. So, he doesn't try and kill or repress the demons. He doesn't suppress them either. I think, I need to think about this a bit more myself, but I think even he doesn't sort of deal with them by sort of religious means and the way we usually think of religion. It's interesting that Shantarakshita is this scholar and revered teacher, but he doesn't know how to work with the demons, yeah? So he doesn't suppress them, he doesn't repress them or suppress them. He doesn't get sentimental about them either, that's quite important. Apparently there's this sort of almost syndrome, I don't know what you call it. I was reading about it in a book by John Burnside, the poet, where it's a real thing, where people actually climb into the cages of animals at the zoo, like lions and stuff like that, and think they're going to be my friend. Anyway, it always goes horribly wrong, suffice to say. So, do you see, he's not sentimental about the demons, and he's not horrified by them. He's not ashamed of them. He's not frightened by them. He's not fazed by them. He doesn't think something's gone wrong, yeah? And I think this is because Padmasambhava knows that when you commit to something, when you commit to bringing into being something that didn't exist before, when you lay the foundation stone and doing that, because remember, the king isn't just a bright idea. The king himself lays that foundation stone. You raise the demons. That very act raises the demons, rouses the demons, yeah? Because, in other words, all those buried forces, all those sleeping forces, you could say, waken up and are roused. In fact, it's only, I think, the more I've sort of tried to practice, the more I've come to believe as a truth that it's only by committing yourself that you awaken those demons, and those demons are part of you, yeah, of me. So that means that it's only by committing yourself that you really know yourself. If you don't commit yourself, you don't know what you're made of, you know. When you do commit yourself, something that was sort of asleep within you actually takes interest and wakes up. And you've got a chance to get to know it, yeah? In other words, you've got a chance to get to know yourself properly. So more and more I've realized, and I think the importance of continually committing oneself. I think in order to commit yourself, you kind of got to grow up, haven't you? You've got to go beyond childhood. You've got to realize that you yourself have agency. And at the same time, commitment itself is integrating. And it's like you've got to be integrated to commit yourself, but also commitment is integrating. So both are working at the same time. And when I say committing yourself, I mean committing yourself to something sort of higher or deeper, yeah? Then you've known. Committing yourself means, by definition, committing yourself to the unknown. You can't commit yourself to the known. You can only commit yourself to something that's hitherto unknown. So it means going beyond what you know. So you've got this image of the temple being raised, something new coming into being that wasn't there before, laying the foundation stone of that. So you can only discover yourself, I think, fully discover yourself, discover those deeper energies within yourself and sort of harness them if you commit to serving something higher and deeper, yeah? Yeah. So I think, when I think about my own life, I think that is what I've always known, actually. I think I've always known that. I think I've always known that even from when I was a very young child. When I was a very young child, I was a very devout Catholic for as long as I remember. My parents were Catholic, but you know, I feel like I was a Catholic. I mean, more than that. I was certainly doing more than they were asking me to do. I was brought up quite a strict Catholic, but on my own volition, even from the age of about 5 or so on, or as long as I can remember, really, I was like going to chapel, praying, my own version of meditation that I'd sort of invented from a very, very young age. And I think, looking back, that I'd intuited that I wanted something to commit to. I wanted something to serve. The thing was, when I got to about the age 11, I realized I didn't believe in God anymore. And that was a disaster. I remember the feeling of disaster when that happened. I was talking about it in our team retreat. The vividness of that memory. Do you know how when with your important memories, you always remember exactly where you were. You remember the place you were in. So I remember sitting about 2/3 back from the front of the chapel on my own. I used to go to the chapel a lot on my own, sort of kneeling there, trying to visualize heaven, really paradise, and suddenly unwanted came into my experience. It's all made up. I don't believe it. I don't believe in God. And I remember the feeling of trying to push that thought away, because I knew that would pull the rug out of everything that I had built my young life around so far. But I couldn't keep the thought out. I knew it was, well, it felt true. I felt no, it's made up. This idea of the Creator God is it's not like that, and I couldn't believe it anymore. So from the age of about 11 until about 22, I kind of tried a few. I studied science and so on, but I didn't find something to serve. I studied science to try and find the answers. Didn't find the answers. But actually, I think I wasn't really looking for answers. I was actually looking for something to serve, which is a bit different. And then when I came across the Dharma at the age of 22, I think the relief was that I had found something to serve, that I had found something that I could wholly give myself to without the danger of bumping up against any glass ceiling of limit to that I could give myself unreservedly to, because somehow I already knew, even though I didn't strangely know much about the Dharma, I hadn't really heard any of the teachings yet or anything, but I sort of seemed to straight away know that the Dharma was representing an ideal that was infinite, that you would never get to the end of, that was I couldn't have put this into words then, but we say enlightenment, but even that isn't an end point. There's no end to it. There's no end to the creativity. There's no end to the unfoldment. There's no end to the expression. That's why I love reciting the positive precepts so much, with deeds of loving kindness, generosity and so on, because there's no end to them. There can never be an end to kindness, to its scope, to its expression. It's limitless. It's a limitless ideal. So you can wholly give yourself to that. So I knew that. At ordination, I sort of sealed that commitment with the ordination vows. And within that, that's the sort of biggest commitment in one way, but actually it's been important to me to always find within that continual ways to commit. I've been ordained for quite a long time now, so although that's the biggest thing, you can't really just rest on that. You've got to keep it alive. It's got to be flourishing. It's not a once and for all thing, or else it just becomes barren. You've got to keep it alive. And for me, the way to keep it alive is to continually commit. And that means continually trying to take responsibility as much as possible in relation to other people. And that's, Pranyamanas mentioned that I'm responsible for helping with ordinations, not just helping with them, conducting them. That's important. That's important for me. It's important, of course, for our order to flourish. We've got to do that to keep the lineage of inspiration alive. But doing that, it calls something of me. To actually witness someone else's going for refuge to these unlimited ideals means I've got to. Something more has to be drawn out of me. And it definitely draws up demons. And that's good, I've learned to see that's good. It's kind of horrible, when the demons get drawn up. But it's good. And I wanted to talk, since Pranamanas was kind enough to give my book as a book recommendation today, it suddenly occurred to me when I was chatting to Pranamanas and Maitreya Banda this morning about the writing that book. It's in fact the only book I've written. It probably was one of the biggest drawer up of demons for me. Yeah, I wonder what it would have been like if I'd written a book about something else. I was thinking I did have one or two scientific papers published with my name on them, but I don't know. I don't think I really did anything to deserve them, and they didn't really mean anything to me. But writing a Dharma book meant a huge deal to me. Because the Dharma means a huge deal to me. So trying to write something, you're trying to write it as best you can, as best you can. And every day when I was writing, I used to make this prayer really that it would be a Dharma book. It would be a Dharma book. It wouldn't so much be my book in a sense. Obviously, it is my book because I wrote it, but it would be a Dharma book. Anyway, when I wrote the book, it was a good while ago now, I did a little tour, around different Buddhist centres, and introducing the book, launching it, and so on. And I found it unusually tiring. I mean, I'm quite used to going from place to place. I'm quite blessed with good sleep and so on, so I can usually don't mind, where I sleep or whatever. Don't mind travelling around, but doing this little tour around mostly the UK and a few other places, I was thinking, God, this is really exhausting. And I thought, why am I getting so exhausted? And then halfway through, I realised that the reason why I was being exhausted was that every single night after I'd done a talk like this, but launching the book, I'd have this very, very vivid nightmare. Sometimes it'd be one of those double nightmares, those really horrible ones where it's a dream within a dream, And the nightmare was the same every time, that I was in some huge order gathering where there were about 600 order members or something like that. And within that ordering gathering, I completely lost my temper and completely... created havoc, lost my temper, and was in complete disgrace. And, was cast out, or was going to be cast out. That was, I don't know if that was definitely the feeling I would have to go. The disgrace was too much to bear. And, and I remember waking up, and that you wake up and you go, oh, you think it's still true, and you think, oh, it's only a dream. But sometimes it would be the double one of oh no, it wasn't a dream this time. And then you'd really wake up, it was a dream. So very, very kind of, I can see the experience. And so, why am I telling you this? So that's my demon. I'm telling you this because that's my demon, That is the fact that was happening. There I am, I've written this book on ethics, not just on the Dharma in general, but on ethics, on behaviour. And here I am with this work still to do. I know I've got that work still to do. I've worked hard on that, the tendency to rage that I know is within me. And... It's not yet in the service of the Dharma. It's not yet in the service of the Dharma because it's still there, frightening me. But at least I know it's there. At least I know it's there. You may think that's a strange thing to say, but I think that for me, that's to know the depth of that is kind of horrendous, but kind of also positive, I think. I hope this is I hope that doesn't sound weird. What I'm trying to say is, before I was a Buddhist, I really thought I was very, very nice, and I really was very, very nice. I really was very, very nice. I was really quite calm, quite helpful sort of person, never got into trouble. I was actually, I was very good. I was very obedient. I never talked in the class when the teacher went out. I never did anything naughty. And then, later on, I was very, very, good sort of person. When I came to Buddhism, at first I was one of those people who didn't think they had any enemies in the fourth stage of the Metta Bhavana. Practicing Buddhism, one of the things I've realized, I hope this doesn't put you off, is that the depth of the unruly forces, the demons, is much, much, infinitely more than I had imagined, yeah? Or would even have dared to imagine, or could even have faced, yeah? So that's why I'm saying that it feels like a step to realize the force of them. And the force of them has been realized by me by doing something like, by committing myself, by doing something like taking responsibility in relation to other people, by doing something like writing a book that then you put out there into the world. It's a thing. You've sort of put it there, it's gone from in here to there. Much, much easier to just go, oh, you know what, I haven't really got much to say, I just won't really say anything. But to do the attempt of doing it as best you can, even though you know it won't be perfect, and so it feels like, I think, and it draws up those sleeping forces, yeah? It draws them up, and at least you know them, yeah? So, at least I know them, and I'm still a bit scared of them, I have to say, but I'm a bit less scared of them, and I'm a bit less ashamed of them. I still am a bit, but I'm a bit less, yeah? And I'll know that something's really changed when I know them more fully, and when I'm not frightened of them, when they're not, I was going to say when they're not nightmares, but even if they are nightmares, I can see that they're just like, the sparks thrown out by the galloping of the horse's hooves, when they're the result of action, when I see that they're not to be ashamed of, they're not something gone wrong, they're not to be sentimentalized over, they're to be treated with respect, and they're to be harnessed, their energy, to be harnessed and put to the service of building that temple, yeah, put to the service of building that temple. I feel like I have, I've laid the foundation stone, I feel like I have done that. I've laid the foundation stone, and I invite you to do that, to lay the foundation, commit yourself to something. I don't know what it'll be for you, but make it something higher, make it something deeper, make it something that's not going to present you with a ceiling, and don't be surprised if that rouses the demons, yeah? Don't be surprised if that rouses the demons. That's a good sign, actually. That's a good sign. And then what you have to do after that is call on Padmasambhava, who has got the means to pin them down, make them reveal their names, and get them to serve to serve that highest ideal, to build that temple. And later on in the retreat, Pranyamanis is going to tell us how Padmasambhava does that. But for now, I better stop. Thank you.